My son was born at 3 a.m. I called my parents, my brother, my aunt. Nobody came. The nurses brought me a sandwich and sat with me instead. 2 weeks later, Mom posted my brother's dog's birthday party. 45 guests. I didn't call again. My name's Harrison. I'm 32, and I want to tell you about the night my son was born. Not because it was magical, although it was. Not because it changed my life, although it absolutely did. I want to tell you about it because it was the night I finally understood something I'd been trying not to see for about 3 decades. Sometimes the people who are supposed to show up for you just won't. And sometimes the people you'd never expect end up being the ones who save you. Let me back up a little. I grew up in a suburb outside of Louisville, Kentucky. Nice neighborhood, decent schools, the kind of place where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and waved at each other from their driveways. My parents, Cheryl and Don, were what most people would call good people. They went to church, they volunteered at the food bank twice a year, they hosted the block party every 4th of July. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family they'd put on a greeting card. From the inside, things were a little different. I have one brother, Garrett. He's 2 years older than me, and growing up, Garrett was the son that my parents' entire universe revolved around. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm saying it because it's the most accurate way I can describe what it was like living in that house. Garrett played baseball, so we were a baseball family. Garrett wanted a dog, so we got a dog. When Garrett decided he wanted to switch from public school to a private academy in 9th grade, my parents took out a second mortgage to make it happen. When I asked if I could take guitar lessons in 7th grade, my mom told me we needed to be mindful of the budget. Look, I know what you're thinking. Plenty of families have a golden child. It's not that unusual. And you're right. But most families at least try to pretend they're being fair. My parents didn't even bother with the pretense. It was like they divided their capacity for love into portions, and Garrett got about 90% of the pie. I got whatever crumbs fell off the plate. Here's a quick example so you understand the flavor of what I'm talking about. When Garrett graduated from high school, my parents threw him a massive party, rented out the back room of a restaurant, invited 60 people, had a slideshow of his life set to music. When I graduated 2 years later, my mom made a lasagna and my dad said, "Good job, bud," without looking up from the TV. I'm not even exaggerating. Those were his exact words. "Good job, bud." Like I just successfully parallel parked. I learned pretty early on that the best strategy was to just not need anything from them. I got a job at 16, saved every dollar, put myself through community college, then transferred to a state university where I studied accounting. Not glamorous, I know, but I was good at it, and more importantly, it was mine. Nobody helped me get there. Nobody co-signed a loan or wrote a check or even asked how my classes were going. I built that whole life with my own 2 hands, and honestly, I was proud of it. After college, I moved to Nashville, got a job at a mid-sized firm, and started building a real life for myself. That's where I met Leah. She was a physical therapist who worked in the same office complex, and the first time I saw her, I walked directly into a glass door. Not my finest moment, but she laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that makes you want to spend the rest of your life being funny, just so you can hear it again. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, and got married in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside of town. My parents came to the wedding, which I appreciated, but my mom spent most of the reception telling people about Garrett's new house. Garrett, by the way, had moved back to Louisville after college and was working for my dad's buddy's construction company. He'd bought a house 3 streets over from my parents, and my mom acted like he'd just been appointed ambassador to France. Leah saw it. She saw all of it. And she never once told me I was being too sensitive or making it up. She just held my hand and said, "I'm your family now." And she meant it. Fast forward a couple of years. Leah and I found out we were expecting. I can't even describe what that felt like. Like someone had handed me the thing I didn't know I'd been starving for my entire life. A chance to build the kind of family I never had. A chance to be the parent I always wished mine had been. I called my mom to tell her the news. She said congratulations, and then immediately asked if Garrett knew yet. I said no, I called you first. She said, "Oh, that's sweet. Well, make sure you tell your brother." That was it. No tears, no excitement. No, "I'm so happy for you. Just make sure you tell your brother." Like I was the town crier delivering news to the important people. When I called Garrett, he said, "Cool, man. Hey, did Dad tell you I'm getting the boat?" He'd apparently been negotiating with our father to take over his fishing boat, and that was what was consuming his mental energy. My wife was growing a human being inside of her, and my brother wanted to talk about a boat. I told myself it didn't matter. I had Leah, I had our baby on the way, I had a good job and a good life. I didn't need them to be excited. But here's the thing about telling yourself something doesn't matter. If you have to tell yourself, it matters. The pregnancy was smooth for the most part. Leah was healthy, the baby was developing perfectly, and we spent our weekends painting the nursery and arguing about names. We settled on Oliver. Oliver James. I picked Oliver because I liked the way it sounded, and James was my grandfather's name. My mom's dad, actually. The one person in my family who ever made me feel like I was enough. As the due date got closer, I started getting nervous. Not about the baby, about the logistics. Leah's parents lived in Oregon, and they'd already booked flights for the week after the due date. My parents were 2 hours away. Garrett was 2 hours away. My Aunt Donna, my dad's sister, was about 90 minutes away. I figured when the time came, I'd make some calls, and people would show up. That's what families do, right? Oliver decided to make his entrance 3 weeks early. At 11:30 on a Wednesday night, Leah's water broke. We grabbed the hospital bag, drove to the hospital, and by 1 in the morning, she was in active labor. The contractions were intense and close together, and the nurses told us this baby was coming fast. At 2:15 in the morning, I stepped into the hallway and started making calls. I called my mom first. It went to voicemail. I called my dad's cell. Voicemail. I called the house phone. Nobody picked up. I called Garrett. He answered on the 4th ring, sounding half asleep, and when I told him Leah was in labor, he said, "Tonight? Dude, it's the middle of the night." I said, "I know. That's kind of how babies work. They don't check your calendar." He said he'd try to come in the morning. I called Aunt Donna. She picked up, listened, and said she had a thing in the morning she couldn't miss, but she'd try to swing by the hospital tomorrow afternoon. A thing. She had a thing. I went back to Leah's room, and I didn't say anything about the calls. She was in pain, and she was scared, and the last thing she needed was to know that my family couldn't be bothered to show up for the birth of our son. I held her hand, and I coached her through the breathing, and I told her she was the strongest person I'd ever met. And at 3:11 in the morning, Oliver James came into the world screaming his head off. He was perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, a full head of dark hair, and a grip that could have crushed a walnut. The nurse put him on Leah's chest, and she started crying, and I started crying, and for about 5 minutes, nothing else in the world existed. Then reality crept back in. I checked my phone. No missed calls. No texts. Nothing. The hours after Oliver was born were some of the most surreal of my life. Leah was exhausted but glowing, holding our son like he was made of glass and gold. The delivery room had that strange hospital quiet where everything feels both enormous and muffled at the same time. Machines beeped softly. Fluorescent lights hummed. And my phone sat on the bedside table like a brick, completely silent. Around 4 in the morning, one of the nurses, a woman named Patrice who looked like she'd seen about 10,000 babies enter this world and still wasn't tired of it, came in to check on Leah. She noticed me sitting in the corner chair, staring at my phone, and she said, "Dad, you doing okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, just waiting to hear back from family." She gave me this look. It wasn't pity exactly. It was more like recognition. Like she'd seen this before and knew what it meant. About an hour later, Patrice came back with another nurse named Jocelyn and a third one I think was named Andrea. They brought a sandwich from the cafeteria, a bag of chips, a can of ginger ale, and a little card they'd signed that said, "Welcome, baby Oliver." Patrice sat down in the chair next to me and said, "We're your people tonight, okay?" And I swear I almost lost it right there. These 3 women who had known me for all of 4 hours decided to show up for me when my own family wouldn't. I ate that sandwich and it was terrible. It was one of those pre-wrapped turkey sandwiches with the bread that tastes like it was baked during the previous administration. But I ate every single bite because those nurses had taken time out of their shift to go down to the cafeteria and bring it back for me. And that meant more than my parents had done in 32 years. By 7 in the morning, Leah was asleep and Oliver was in the bassinet next to her bed. I stepped out into the hallway and tried calling my parents again. This time my mom answered. She sounded annoyed, like I'd interrupted her morning coffee. I told her Oliver had been born at 3:11 in the morning, 7 pounds 2 ounces. Everyone was healthy. She said, "Oh, wonderful. Send me a picture." That was it. No apology for not answering the phone. No, we're on our way. No, I wish I'd been there. Just send me a picture. Like my son's birth was an Instagram post she wanted to scroll past. I sent the picture. She replied with a heart emoji. Garrett never called. Not that morning, not that afternoon, not that day at all. He texted me around 8 that night, almost 17 hours after Oliver was born, and the text said, "Congrats bro, cute kid." Mom showed me the pic. That was the whole thing. The full extent of my brother's acknowledgement that he had a nephew. Aunt Donna never showed up. She never called either. The thing she couldn't miss turned out to be more important than the birth of her great-nephew, and I never found out what it was. Honestly, I didn't ask. I didn't want to know because I was afraid it would be something mundane enough to break me. Leah's parents called from Oregon and talked to us for 45 minutes on video chat. Her mom cried. Her dad told me he was proud of me. They said they were changing their flights and coming in 3 days early. Leah's family showed up. Not physically, not yet, but they showed up in every way that actually mattered. We brought Oliver home on a Friday. The house smelled like the lavender candles Leah liked, and we'd left the nursery light on by accident, so it looked like it was waiting for him. I put the car seat on the floor and just watched him sleep and thought, I will never do to you what they did to me. You will never sit in a hospital hallway wondering why nobody came. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't reach out to my family. Part of it was that I was busy, because newborns are basically tiny sleep-destroying machines that run on milk and chaos. But part of it was something else. I was testing a theory. I wanted to see if anyone would reach out to me. Nobody did. 14 days. Not a single call, text, or message from my parents, my brother, or my aunt. My son had been alive for 2 weeks, and none of them had asked how he was, how Leo was, how I was, whether we needed anything. It was like Oliver's birth had been an event in someone else's life that had nothing to do with them. And then I saw the post. It was a Sunday morning. Leo was napping, Oliver was in my arms, and I was scrolling through social media with one hand like every new parent in history has done at 4 in the morning. And there it was, at the top of my feed, posted by my mother. It was a photo album. 43 photos. Garrett's dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, wearing a birthday hat, surrounded by balloons and a custom dog cake, and a banner that said, "Happy Birthday, Biscuit." In the photos, I could see my parents' backyard, the one I grew up playing in. There were tables and chairs set up, a cooler full of drinks, a photo booth with props. There were people everywhere. My mom's caption said, "Biscuit turns 4. So blessed to celebrate with 45 of our closest friends and family. This good boy deserves the world." 45 guests. For a dog's birthday party. I want you to sit with that for a second. My mother organized an event for 45 people to celebrate a dog turning 4. She coordinated invitations, decorations, catering, a photo booth, and a custom cake. She spent what had to be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a party for an animal. And she did all of this within 2 weeks of her grandson being born. A grandson she hadn't visited, hadn't called about, hadn't shown an ounce of interest in. I looked at the photos more closely. My dad was in several of them, laughing, holding a beer, wearing a shirt that said Biscuit's grandpa. My Aunt Donna was there. The woman who couldn't make it to the hospital because she had a thing was at a dog's birthday party 2 weeks later, holding a plate of cake and grinning. Garrett was there, obviously, throwing a tennis ball for Biscuit in the background of one photo, and in another he had his arm around my mom, and they were both beaming like they'd just won the lottery. And there I was, 2 hours south, sitting in a dark nursery, holding my son, looking at photos of my family celebrating a dog while they hadn't even acknowledged that Oliver existed. Leah found me in the nursery about 20 minutes later. She said she woke up and the bed was cold. She saw my face and immediately knew something was wrong. I showed her the phone. She scrolled through the photos slowly, and her expression went from confused to angry to something I'd never quite seen on her before. It was the look of someone who was done. Not just frustrated, not just upset. Done. She looked at me and said, "Harrison, you need to stop calling them." I said, "I know." She said, "No, I mean it. Not out of spite. Not to teach them a lesson. Because they've already shown you who you are to them, and you keep giving them chances to prove you wrong, and they never do. You're not calling them because you want to talk to them. You're calling them because you want them to be different people. And they're not going to be." She was right. She was absolutely right. And hearing it out loud, from someone who loved me, who had watched this play out for years, was like having a bone set. Painful, but necessary. I didn't call again. I put my phone down on the nightstand, picked up my son, and made a decision that would change everything. I was done auditioning for a role in my own family. The thing about finally letting go of something you've been gripping for your entire life is that it doesn't feel liberating right away. It feels like falling. For the first few days, I kept reaching for my phone, wanting to call my mom and tell her about Oliver's first smile, or the way he grabbed my finger and wouldn't let go. But I'd stop myself, and each time I stopped, it hurt a little less. What hurt more was the realization that they weren't reaching out either. The silence wasn't just mine. It was mutual. The only difference was that my silence was intentional, and theirs was natural. I was choosing not to call. They just didn't think about it. The first month of silence was the hardest. Not because I missed the conversations. Honestly, there hadn't been many worth missing, but because the silence made the truth louder. When you're constantly reaching out to people, you can tell yourself that the relationship exists because you're maintaining it. When you stop, you see what was actually there. And in my case, what was actually there was nothing. My parents didn't call. Garrett didn't text. Aunt Donna didn't send a card. Oliver turned 1 month old, then 6 weeks, then 2 months, and as far as my family was concerned, he might as well not have existed. I know because I checked. I went through my phone, my email, my mailbox. Nothing. Not a single piece of communication from any of them. Meanwhile, Leah's parents flew in and stayed for 10 days. Her mom, Sandra, cooked us meals and froze them in labeled containers. Her dad, Doug, assembled a bookshelf that had been sitting in a box in the garage for 3 months because I'd been too exhausted to figure out the instructions. They held Oliver. They changed diapers. They did dishes without being asked. Doug even fixed a drip in our bathroom sink and refused to let me pay for the parts. When they left, Sandra hugged me and said, "You're a wonderful father, Harrison. We're lucky Oliver has you." I almost broke down right there, because that was the first time a parent figure had ever said something like that to me. I threw myself into work, not to avoid my feelings, although that was a nice side benefit, but because I had a family to provide for now. I'd been at my accounting firm for 6 years, doing solid work, but never really pushing for more. I was comfortable, which is a polite way of saying I was stagnant. But something about becoming a father lit a fire in me that I didn't know was there. I started taking on bigger clients. I volunteered for projects that other people avoided because they were complex and time-consuming. I stayed late when I needed to, but I also made sure I was home by 6:30 every night because I'd made a promise to myself that Oliver would never wonder where his dad was. I found this rhythm where I was working harder than I ever had, but also more present at home than I thought possible. It turns out when you cut toxic people out of your life, you suddenly have all this energy that you used to spend on managing their dysfunction. My boss, a guy named Craig who'd been in the business for 30 years and had the kind of handshake that could crush a cinder block, started noticing. He called me into his office one Thursday afternoon and said, "Harrison, what's gotten into you?" I said I had a kid now and I wanted to build something. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Good, because I've been thinking about succession and I want you to start thinking about it too." That conversation changed the trajectory of my career. Craig didn't just mean he wanted me to take on more responsibility. He meant he was looking at retirement within the next few years, and he wanted to groom someone to potentially take over the firm. He had 3 other senior accountants, but he chose me. Me, the guy whose own parents never chose him for anything. I started working with Craig directly, learning the business side of running a firm, not just the accounting side. Client relationships, revenue management, staffing decisions, the whole picture. It was like getting a second education, except this time someone actually believed I was worth investing in. At home, things were good. Better than good. Oliver was growing into this hilarious, curious, absurdly stubborn little person. He had Leah's eyes and my stubbornness, which she said was a dangerous combination. He started crawling at 7 months, and once he figured out locomotion, he treated our house like an obstacle course designed specifically to give his parents heart attacks. I baby-proofed everything. He found the one outlet I missed. That's parenting. Leah went back to work part-time when Oliver was 4 months old, and we figured out a childcare arrangement with a woman named Rosa who ran a small home daycare 3 blocks from our house. Rosa adored Oliver, and Oliver adored Rosa, and every day when I picked him up he'd have paint on his face and a grin that made the whole day worth it. I also started building friendships that I'd neglected. My buddy Trent from college lived about 40 minutes away, and we started doing dinner once a month with our wives. I got close with a guy named Adam at work, who had kids the same age and understood the particular brand of exhaustion that comes with being a new dad. I joined a weekend basketball league at the YMCA, which I was terrible at, but it got me out of the house and moving. For the first time in my life, I had a community that I'd built from scratch. Not one I was born into, not one I was trying to earn a place in. One that existed because the people in it actually wanted to be there. 6 months passed, then 8, then 10, and still, nothing from my family. Oliver's first Thanksgiving came and went. His first Christmas. I posted photos on social media occasionally, and I noticed my mom liked a few of them, which was somehow worse than silence. She could double tap a photo of my son, but couldn't pick up the phone and call. I want to be honest about something here. Even though I was building this incredible life, even though I was happier than I'd ever been, there were nights when it hit me. Usually around 2 in the morning, during one of Oliver's wake-ups, when the house was dark and quiet and my defenses were down. I'd be rocking him back to sleep and I'd think about my mom. And I'd feel this ache that no amount of success or friendship or logic could touch. Because at the end of the day, she was my mom. And she chose a dog party over my son. Leah always knew when I'd had a rough night. She'd find me in the morning looking like I'd been hit by a truck, and she'd pour me an extra cup of coffee and squeeze my shoulder and not say anything, because she knew there was nothing to say. Some wounds don't have words. You just carry them until they get lighter. Oliver turned 1. Leah and I threw him a small party. Sandra and Doug flew in from Oregon. Trent and his wife came. Adam and his family. Rosa, Craig and his wife. Patrice, the nurse from the hospital, who I'd stayed in touch with, because when someone shows up for you at 3 in the morning with a terrible sandwich, you don't forget them. We had about 20 people in our backyard, and there was a little smash cake that Oliver destroyed with the enthusiasm of someone who'd just discovered the meaning of life. I looked around at those people, and I realized something that changed everything. This was my family. Not by blood, but by choice. Every single person at that party was there because they wanted to be. Nobody had been guilted into coming. Nobody was there out of obligation. They were there because they loved us, and we loved them, and that was enough. My mom didn't know about the party. Neither did my dad, Garrett, or Aunt Donna. I hadn't invited them. I hadn't even considered it. And for the first time, their absence didn't feel like a wound. It just felt like a fact. The quiet strength I'd built over that year was about to be tested, though. Because about 3 weeks after Oliver's first birthday, my phone rang. It was a Louisville area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was my Aunt Donna, and she was crying. She said, "Harrison, it's your mother. She's in the hospital." I'm going to be honest with you. When Donna said my mother was in the hospital, my first emotion wasn't panic. It wasn't even worry. It was exhaustion. The kind of tiredness that comes from knowing exactly what's about to happen and not wanting any part of it. Because I knew, in the way you know things in your bones before your brain catches up, that this phone call wasn't about my mother's health. It was about pulling me back in. I asked Donna what happened. She said my mom had been having chest pains and they'd taken her to the emergency room, run some tests, and were keeping her overnight for observation. She said it didn't seem life-threatening, but everyone was worried. I said, "Okay, I hope she's all right." And then Donna said the thing I'd been waiting for. "Harrison, your mother's been asking for you. She wants to see you and the baby." There it was. Not she misses you. Not she's sorry she hasn't been in touch. She wants to see you and the baby. Like we were a package she'd ordered and forgotten to pick up. My son had a name. He was 13 months old. He could walk. He could say dada and no and more, which honestly covers about 80% of human communication. And to my mother, he was still just the baby. I told Donna I'd think about it. She got quiet and then said, "Harrison, she's your mother." I said, "I know who she is, Donna. I also know she didn't call when Oliver was born, didn't visit, didn't send a card, and managed to throw a 45-person party for a dog 2 weeks after my son came into this world. So when you say she's my mother, I need you to understand that those words don't mean the same thing to me that they mean to you." Donna didn't have a response for that. She stammered something about how my mother had been busy and didn't mean anything by it. And I said, "Donna, busy people call. Busy people text. You don't accidentally ignore your grandson for a year because you're busy. You do it because he's not a priority." She said she'd let my mom know I'd think about it, and we hung up. I told Leah about the call. She listened, and then she said something that surprised me. She said, "You should go. Not for her. For you. Because if something happens and you didn't go, you'll carry that. But if you go and she hasn't changed, at least you'll know for sure." She was right. Leah had this way of seeing through my defenses to the thing I was actually afraid of, which in this case was regret. Not regret over the relationship I didn't have, but regret over the chance I didn't take. So the next morning, I drove to Louisville. I left Leah and Oliver at home because I wanted to see the situation first before I brought my son into it. The drive was 2 hours of silence. I didn't turn on the radio. I just drove and thought about what I wanted to say and what I expected to hear and whether any of it would matter. When I got to the hospital, I found my mom's room on the 3rd floor. My dad was sitting in a chair by the window, reading a magazine. Garrett was leaning against the wall, scrolling his phone. Aunt Donna was fussing with the pillows on my mom's bed. And my mom was propped up, looking tired but not terrible, wearing a hospital gown and a thin smile. When I walked in, the room went quiet. My dad looked up from his magazine. Garrett put his phone down. Donna stepped back, and my mom looked at me and said, "There he is. There's my boy." I want to tell you that those words hit me like a wave of warmth. I want to tell you that hearing her call me her boy after a year of silence melted something inside me. But it didn't, because I noticed something. She said, "There's my boy," the way you'd say it to someone you saw last week, not someone you'd ghosted for over a year. There was no apology in her voice, no guilt, no acknowledgement that anything had happened at all. I sat down. I asked her how she was feeling. She said better. The tests had come back mostly normal. They thought it was stress-related. She said she'd been working too hard on Garrett's house renovation. I blinked. Garrett was renovating his house, and my parents were apparently helping him do it. And this was the first I was hearing about it. My mom had been so stressed from helping my brother renovate his house that she'd ended up in the hospital. My dad chimed in. He said, "Yeah, your brother's adding a whole 2nd floor. Your mother's been over there every day painting, picking out fixtures, coordinating with contractors." He said this with pride, like it was an admirable thing that his wife had worked herself into a hospital bed doing free labor for their other son. Garrett, to his credit, at least had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. He said, "Mom, you didn't have to do all that. I told you to take it easy." My mom waved him off and said, "Oh, hush. That's what mothers do. That's what mothers do." She said that while looking at the son she actually showed up for, in front of the son she didn't. I don't think she even realized what she'd said. That's the thing about favoritism. The people doing it rarely see it. It's like water to a fish. I sat there for about 20 minutes, making small talk about things that didn't matter, while the thing that did matter sat in the room like an elephant wearing a neon sign. Finally, my mom said, "Harrison, when are you going to bring the baby up to see us? I've been dying to meet him." Dying to meet him. She'd been dying to meet him. For 13 months. Without once picking up the phone to arrange a visit or, driving 2 hours south. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. The kind of sharp, cold focus that comes when you finally stop hoping and start seeing. I said, "Mom, his name is Oliver." She blinked. "I know his name." I said, "Do you?" "Because you've never used it. Not once. Not on the phone. Not in a text. Not in any of the 0 cards or messages you've sent in the 13 months since he was born." The room got very quiet. My dad set down his magazine. Garrett straightened up against the wall. Donna started fidgeting with her purse strap. My mom's face did that thing that faces do when someone isn't used to being confronted. It cycled through surprise, confusion, offense, and then settled on something that looked a lot like annoyance. She said, "Harrison, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been thinking about you and the baby constantly." I said, "Oliver. His name is Oliver. And thinking about someone isn't the same as showing up for them. You didn't come to the hospital when he was born. I called you at 2 in the morning and you didn't answer. I called Dad. He didn't answer. I called Garrett, who told me it was the middle of the night like I didn't already know that. I called Donna, who said she had a thing. None of you came. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever." My mom started to say something, and I held up my hand. I wasn't done. 2 weeks after Oliver was born, you threw a birthday party for Garrett's dog. 45 guests. A photo booth. A custom cake. You posted about it on social media like it was the event of the year. And in those same 2 weeks, you never once asked about your grandson. You never called to see how Leah was recovering. You never offered to come down and help. You organized an entire event for an animal and couldn't send a text to your son. I looked at Donna, and you were there. At the dog party. The thing you couldn't miss wasn't at the hospital, but you sure made it to Biscuit's birthday. Donna looked like she wanted the floor to open up and swallow her. Good. She should. My mom's eyes were filling up, but I couldn't tell if it was genuine emotion or the reflexive tears of someone who'd been caught. She said, "Harrison, that's not fair. You know I love you." I said, "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Why? Why has it always been this way? Why was everything always about Garrett? Why was his graduation a party and mine was a lasagna? Why did you remortgage the house for his school and tell me we couldn't afford guitar lessons? Why did you throw a party for his dog and not come to the hospital for my son?" That was the question I'd been carrying for 32 years, and I was finally asking it out loud. The room was so quiet I could hear the heart monitor beeping from the room next door. My mom stared at me with her mouth slightly open, like I'd just spoken a language she didn't know existed. And maybe I had, because in our family, the language we spoke was avoidance. We didn't name things. We didn't confront. We just accepted the way things were and pretended it was normal. My dad broke the silence first. He shifted in his chair and said, "Harrison, come on. Don't upset your mother. She's in the hospital." I looked at him. I said, "Dad, I have been upset for 32 years and nobody in this room has ever once worried about that. Mom is going to be fine. The doctors said it's stress. She's going home tomorrow. I am asking a question that I deserve an answer to, and I'm not going to apologize for the timing." My dad didn't have a comeback for that. He just kind of sank back into his chair and stared at his hands. I looked at my mom again. "Why, Mom?" She wiped her eyes. And then she said something that I genuinely did not expect. She said, "Garrett needed me more." I waited for her to elaborate. She didn't. So I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "You were always so independent, Harrison. Even as a kid, you never asked for help. You never needed anything from us. Garrett was different. He struggled in school. He got in trouble. He needed guidance and attention and support. You just handled things. You always handled things. I didn't worry about you because I didn't have to." I want you to understand what she was saying. She was telling me that because I was self-sufficient, because I didn't create problems, because I figured things out on my own, I deserved less. That my competence was the reason she'd neglected me. That Garrett got more love because he demanded it, and I got less because I didn't. I sat with that for a second, and then I said, "Mom, do you know why I was independent? Because I had to be. Because every time I needed something, you were busy with Garrett. I stopped asking because asking never worked. I wasn't some naturally self-sufficient kid who didn't need his parents. I was a kid who learned that his parents weren't available, so he stopped trying. You didn't raise an independent son. You neglected one until he had no choice but to raise himself." The color drained from her face. I could see it happening in real time, like someone had pulled a plug. My dad was staring at the floor. Garrett was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. It might have been guilt. It might have been the first time he'd ever considered any of this from my perspective. My mom said, "I didn't mean to hurt you." I said, "I believe that. I believe you didn't mean to. But you did. Every single day, for my entire childhood, and then into my adult life. And the fact that it wasn't intentional doesn't make it hurt less. It actually makes it worse, because it means I wasn't even important enough to hurt on purpose. I was just invisible." She started crying for real then. Not the performative kind. The kind where your whole body gets involved and you can't control your breathing. My dad went to her side and put his arm around her, and Donna handed her a tissue, and Garrett just stood there looking like someone had turned the lights on in a room he'd been comfortable sitting in the dark. I didn't comfort her. I know that sounds cold, but I'd spent my whole life managing other people's feelings at the expense of my own. This was her moment to sit with the consequences of her choices. I'd been sitting with them for 3 decades. She could handle a few minutes. After a while, she collected herself and said, "What do you want me to do, Harrison?" I said, "I don't want you to do anything. I'm not here for an apology tour. I'm not here to make you feel bad. I came because Donna called and said you were in the hospital, and despite everything, you're still my mother, and I wanted to make sure you were okay. You are. So now I'm telling you the truth, because after 32 years, I think I've earned the right." I stood up. I looked at each of them. My dad, who'd never once intervened. Garrett, who'd soaked up every ounce of attention like it was his birthright. Donna, who chose a dog party over the birth of my son. I said, "I have a beautiful wife, a son named Oliver, a career I'm proud of, and people who actually show up when it matters. I built all of that without any of you. I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you because if we're ever going to have a real relationship, it starts with you seeing me. Not as the kid who didn't need anything, but as the kid who needed everything and got nothing. Nobody spoke. I said, I'm going home to my family now. If you want to be part of Oliver's life, you know where to find me. But I'm done being the one who reaches out. I'm done driving 2 hours to be an afterthought. You build the bridge. I've been building from my side for 32 years, and I'm tired. I walked out. I got in my car. I sat in the parking lot for about 5 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, breathing. And then I called Leah. She answered on the first ring, because that's what people who love you do. She said, how'd it go? I said everything I needed to say. She said, good. Come home. Oliver just learned how to stack blocks, and he keeps knocking them over and laughing like a maniac. I drove home. 2 hours of open road and clear sky and a feeling in my chest that I can only describe as lightness. Not happiness exactly. Not yet. But the absence of something heavy that I'd been carrying for so long I'd forgotten it was there. Here's what happened after. My mom called 3 days later. Not to argue or deflect. To apologize. A real one. She said she'd been up every night since I left, replaying what I'd said, and she knew I was right. She said she'd been a terrible mother to me, and she didn't expect forgiveness, but she needed me to know she was sorry. I thanked her for saying it. I didn't say I forgave her, because I wasn't there yet, and I wasn't going to pretend. My dad called a week later and said, I let you down, son. I should have spoken up a long time ago. That one nearly broke me. Not because it fixed anything, but because it meant he'd finally seen it. Garrett took a month. He drove down to Nashville on a Saturday, met Oliver for the first time, and sat on my porch drinking iced tea while Oliver crawled around the yard. He said, I didn't understand how different things were for you. I'm sorry, man. I said, you benefited from it, Garrett. Every extra thing you got was something I didn't. He nodded. He said, I know. I'm going to do better. I didn't hand out forgiveness like participation trophies, but I left the door open because that's what I'd promised myself. I'd build the life I wanted and let people earn their way into it. Oliver is almost 2 now. He's obsessed with trucks and bananas and saying, oh, every time he drops something, which is constantly. Leah is the best partner I could ask for, and Craig officially offered me the succession plan last month. I'm going to own the firm within 3 years. My parents have visited twice since the hospital. They're trying. It's awkward and imperfect, and sometimes my mom slips into old patterns, but she catches herself now. And when she holds Oliver, I can see in her eyes that she knows what she missed and can't get it back. I think about those nurses sometimes. Patrice and Jocelyn and Andrea, who brought me a terrible sandwich at 4 in the morning and said, we're your people tonight. I sent them a thank you card when Oliver turned 1. Patrice wrote back and said, we knew you'd be a great dad. Some of us can just tell. Here's what I want to leave you with. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by presence. By who answers the phone at 2 in the morning. By who shows up with a sandwich when you're sitting alone in a hospital hallway with a newborn and a breaking heart. By who looks at you and sees you, not the role you play or the space you fill, but you. I spent 32 years trying to earn a seat at a table that was never set for me. And then I built my own table, and the right people sat down. Oliver will never wonder if he's loved. He will never sit in a hallway alone. He will never have to earn his place in his own family. Because I know what that feels like, and I will spend every day of my life making sure he never does. My name is Harrison. I'm 32 years old. I have a wife who answers on the first ring, a son who laughs when blocks fall down, and a life I built from nothing. And I'm doing just fine.